Welcome to Voices of the Dream. Today, our episode, we are talking to Baroness Jessica Clarke. Baroness Clarke, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, good morning. My name is Baroness Jessica Clarke. I am located in the Barony of Calafia within the Kingdom of Caid, which is in the tip of Southern California. For anybody who does not know, mundanely, I am known as Jessica Brodkin Webb. Brodkin was my maiden name. Webb is my late husband's married name. And it was important to me when I began in the SCA to keep the name Jessica, partially because I think it's a little unusual to run into people who are willing to use their same name, and also because it has some special meaning to me to have the name itself. So, shall I continue, or do you want to ask some questions first?
Go ahead and tell us your persona story.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned, it was important to me to keep the first name of Jessica, partially because, like I said, I think it's unusual when people change names from something, especially when they have something that can be passed in a medieval sense, like a Christopher or a Michael or something like that. I find it unusual when they change their name to something completely different. I never really know how to address them, even though I've been in the SA a very long time. But I wanted to definitely keep my name for specific reasons. My dad named me for Jessica from The Merchant of Venice, which means that the name itself is period because obviously that is one of Shakespeare's pieces. I find it interesting also that my dad chose that particular name from The Merchant of Venice because Jessica in The Merchant of Venice actually defies her dad pretty badly. She's very strong. She always chooses to walk her own path. She decides she's going to be in charge of her own destiny and she's going to choose what she wants to do with her life, which is admirable and yet not exactly what you would expect of a father to choose for his daughter. I found it very lovely that my dad would choose to recognize that we have our kids, but we do ultimately want them to walk their own path. Clarke, the last name, is equally important to me, also because of my dad, but going back even further, and this is not a medieval reference. However, the name Clarke itself can be traced back much further than colonial times in the United States. So I think it was a fair use to keep it as a medieval name. However, the reason it mattered to me is that a very small number of people signed the Declaration of Independence, one of whom was Abraham Clarke. He is one of my ancestors, and a clerk is an old term for a writer, otherwise known as a clerk. The whole branch of my family on that side were very prolific writers and continue to be writers to this day. So, why does this matter to me as far as personas in the SCA, and why is it different than any other name in the SCA? When you put the two together, I believe the meaning of it is that someone who would be a very independent, educated writer who is able to stand on their own merit. In medieval times, you wouldn't have found a whole heck of a lot of women like this. I have researched the handful of women who wrote on their own, and they seem to have terrible, tragic backstories. One was deaf and became a nun in Spain. Others wrote under surnames. We have all different ways that women find a way to stand on their own 2 feet and write. But when I first started in the SCA, I was in college. I sat between two lovely different Seans, and they would talk about this hobby over my head and finally invited me to check out an event. So I have now been a heavy weapons fighter for over 2 decades, well over 2 decades at this point, consistently. And I do have two kids as well. And I have fought the entire time, including 4 days pregnant with my daughter, which, much to everyone's dismay, I probably should not have been doing, but I did anyway. And I did not envision when I took on the name Jessica Clarke way back when that I would ultimately become a very independent, stand on your own 2 feet writer. At the time, I was a college kid. I hadn't been married. I didn't have my kids yet. My now late husband hadn't been through a long, horrible cancer battle. None of my life existed yet. I was basically an unwritten page. And the name Jessica Clarke was strong. It was pretty. It certainly was, 15th century. It fit in with um, all the limitations that I wanted to put on a character like that, if we are referring to her, if you want to say that as a character with her own backstory, but she really didn't exist yet. What I find most interesting, and I'll wrap it up, is that here I am 25 plus years later, and I have now worked as a writer on my own, started my own boutique publishing company after my husband passed away. I have had kids that I've raised, and my daughter, my oldest, is now 19, fights side by side with me on the heavies field. We're maybe not known in Caid, but at least most people can spot the two rather small female spear fighters side by side. And the thing that I find interesting to take it back to why we are talking about personas and names is that in most places we take on this alternate persona, and maybe they have some aspects of our personality, but then again, they might not. I think I'm the only person I know that sort of became the persona that was created without realizing that was actually going to be me in the future. And as I mentioned when I had emailed you earlier, I think that I, modern day Jessica, would have been very good friends with this lady who managed to find her way in what would have been a very challenging world as a female writer without a husband and two kids to raise.
I like that. That's
Thank
a new take on. I mean, I hear people that they develop their persona to fit themselves, but yeah, I think you're the first one I've talked to where the persona kind of gave you the glimpse of that future, and then there you went.
And I had no idea. To be fair, in college, I was a dramaturgy major. Most people don't know what that is. It's writing and editing and working with old scripts. I did graduate from college, went to work at the Old Globe. So, I mean, the hint was there. Certainly, I was never, I don't know, an accountant or a business developer or something like that. But I could not have foreseen how much who I created in this independent female writer on her own, how much I would actually become that person, which I think is really interesting to see how closely those worlds collided and how very real this hobby that we play in can be. We say it's a dream, but sometimes it becomes our reality.
I love that. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Baroness, for joining us and telling us your persona story.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and good luck with all that you do.
And this is Voices of the Dream. Until next time.